Greetings to everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is your favorite teacher coming back with another video. Today, we're revising functions. So the reason I'm doing a revision, I want learners to actually rectify their mistakes. I want you guys to rectify your mistakes. So this is one of the core topics of paper one. Mastering this topic puts you on a safe side of passing paper one. So without waste of time, let's begin to answer the question. Question 6, the diagram below shows the graphs of f of x and then g of x. They gave us a parabola in terms of the turning point, and then they gave us a hyperbola where there's also a shift. Graph f cuts the x-axis at A and C, the y-axis at E, and has a turning point at D. Graph G cuts the x-axis at A and the y-axis at B. 6.1. Write down the equation of the asymptote. So we can see that there's a shift there on graph G. There's a shift there. So that becomes our equation of an asymptote. So we need to say y is equals to -4. That's our asymptote. Then 6.2. Write down the coordinates of D. Okay, coordinates of D. So we need to consider the graph of F because D lies on F. So we have your -3 and your +25. But now the turning point would be 3:25, which is the point D. So the turning point becomes our point D, right? So now one would say, but now why is our x value at turning point positive, whereas here there's a negative, right? So the standard formula for the parabola with a turning point is as follows. So this is in a form of a turning point where you're given a turning point, then the formula will be in this form, right? Where this is your x at turning point, this is your y at turning point. So the original formula has negative there, right? It has a what? A negative. So let's say, for an example, they give you 2:5 as your turning point, right? When you substitute it here, you will have x minus, and then your +2 there, squared plus 5. Mind you that there's +2, but when it gets here, it changes to negative because of the negative sign from the original formula. So that's what we did even for the turning point of 3:25. The original formula had a negative and it affected the 3, but 3 is positive. So hence we are having turning point of 3:25. Okay, now let's move to the next question, 6.3. So 6.3, write down the range of f. So we're looking for the range of f. Before we write down the range of f, we need to understand the definition of a range. What is a range? Right? So a range is just simple. Where do you see your graph in terms of y? Which graph? You go back to your question. Range of f. So where do you see the graph of f in terms of y, right? Okay, we got the point of D, which is 3:25. Where do you see your graph in terms of y? So we focusing on y. So I'm only concerned with y. So where do you see your parabola in terms of y? From negative infinity to positive 25. That's where you can see your parabola. Above 25, there's no parabola, right? I hope we're still on the same page. So how do you write that in a mathematical form? We need to say y is lesser or equals to 25. Or we can write it as y is an element of negative infinity is to 25 included. The reason why I'm not including negative infinity because infinity is not an actual value, but 25 is an actual value. That's where our graph tends, right? Tends at 25 in terms of y. That's why I include 25. I hope it makes sense to everyone. Now let's move to 6.4. Calculate the length of EP. Okay, so now we're looking for the length of EP. So firstly, we must analyze E is just the y-intercept. And y-intercept, x should always be 0. B is also y-intercept, which means x should always be also 0, right? But y-intercept where? Y-intercept of x, and then the y-intercept of g, right? Let's start with E. So for E, we can see E lies on F, so which means we need to use the graph of F. We must use the graph of F because E lies on F. But we said E is the what? Is the y-intercept, which means we let x equals to 0. In place of x, you substitute a 0. And then this will give us a what? 16. So that's your y at E. So this is 16. Same applies to point B. Now we need to use the graph of G because point B lies on graph of G, which is our hyperbola. So we have a G of 0, 0 plus 1 minus 4, which will give us -3, right? And then now I want us to go back to something. EB, distance EB is just a what? A vertical distance because it lies on y-axis. So that's the what? The vertical distance. But how do you get the vertical distance? So that one is simple. That one is quite simple because we need to say EB is equals to the top graph minus, let me just say the top graph, which is f of x minus the bottom graph, which is g of x. But now, since this lies on what? On x-axis, which means we on y-axis rather, sorry. Since this lies on y-axis, we simply focus on y-axis, which means we need to make sure that we get the difference between the y values. So obviously the top graph, in terms of y there, you have your 16 minus your -3. which is equals to 16 plus 3. That's just 19, but this is a distance. So we need to say 19 units. That's your EP. Believe that everyone understood that part and it makes sense. Now, determine the values of x for which f is decreasing. So this is basically about interpreting the graph now. So we need to be able to know how to interpret the graph. But now, for you to interpret the graph, you need to have at least all the relevant values or all the relevant points. So for this situation, the relevant point here is D. The relevant point here is D because we need the axis of symmetry. What is the axis of symmetry? Is the x at turning point. So the x at turning point there is what? 3, right? We need that x value, x at turning point. Now they're saying, for which values of x is the graph of f decreasing? I'll use different colors so that I can make things clear. So on our left hand side, the graph is going up, increasing. Right hand side, the graph is going down, which is what? Decreasing. Right. Now, how do we express this? How do we write this? In a mathematical form, how do we write this? Where is our graph increasing? From positive 3 to your left hand side, the graph is increasing, it's going up. And then where is our graph now decreasing? From 3 to the right hand side, the graph is going down, the graph is decreasing, right? So now, how do you write that in terms of maths now? How do we write it? The language. So now you have your 6.5, right? 6.5. We are saying the graph is decreasing where from positive 3 to your right hand side. That's where the graph is decreasing, right? So we need to say x should be greater than 3, or we can say x is an element of not included positive infinity, 3 is to positive infinity, right? So even if you can use the solutions where it is included, you will still get the marks. X is an element of included, 3 is to infinity. You will still get the marks, right? There's nothing wrong. Because remember now, 3 is an actual value, so obviously we need to what? Include it. So I believe that this video was of help because this is one of the core topics of paper 1. So I want us to master functions so that we can be able to answer paper 1 and be able to pass it as well. So thank you for your time, family. Thank you for your time. We've come to the end of our video. Bye.